Hello, my creepy crew. Mystery here with another collection of mysteries and oddities. In episode 15, I'll be sharing several strange and spooky tales, including unexplained occurrences while camping, a terrifying stay in a haunted cottage, and a parent who experiences the worst fright. Sit back, relax, and enjoy episode 15 of Miss Story Mysteries Tales of Mysteries and Oddities. When I was about 8 or so, my family went up to a campsite near a lake. We went with several other families, and they brought their kids too. One thing me and this one kid would do is search the shallow areas for crawdads. As I was searching, I began to venture a ways out until the water was up to my waist. The water wasn't too clear, but it also wasn't muddy, and I could see the pale area of the shallows and the darker area where the water dropped off, but I didn't know that at the time. I ended up stepping into the darker, deeper water and began to fall in. Before I could, a pale, slender arm grabbed my leg and pushed me back to the shallows. All I saw was the arm as it sunk back into the deeper water before I skittered back to the shore. I remember it as clear as day, but nothing has ever turned up from that lake. No bodies, no drownings, nothing. My parents still think I made it up. I never believed in anything paranormal, but when I look back on the few years I lived in my first house, there was definitely some weird things going on there. We were the first owners of a house that had been condemned, purchased at auction, and flipped. It was right opposite of railroad tracks, and in the 60s, the trains would drop off girls from the city. The first day my husband and I moved in, we were sitting in the living room, and we were both simultaneously overwhelmed by a sense of utter dread. At the time, we thought it was because our lives had just changed so fast, first home and all, but I'll never forget that feeling. It was deep in my gut. It was dark. We cried together. We'd never done anything like that before. It was intense and awful. There was this attic space that had been turned into a spare bedroom on the 4th floor. Weird stuff happened in this room. We'd come home from work and our dog would be sitting on the 3rd floor landing, just staring up the stairs. Our dog is a gentle giant, won't even bark at a cat, but he would growl at those stairs and scare everyone by barking at something that wasn't there. Every once in a while, I'd be sitting at my computer or reading a book in bed, and the room would start shaking. It was a slight tremor, would last about a minute, then would go away. I once asked the neighbors if they ever felt earthquakes. They looked at me like I was crazy. This is the part that gets freaky. Every few weeks, for as long as we lived there, the smoke alarms in the spare bedroom would go off, always at 4:15 in the morning. We replaced the batteries, the alarms, we called an electrician, nothing was wrong. In that same bedroom, there was a ceiling fan. This wasn't a cheap plastic fan. This was the kind with joints made of wrought iron. They were solid pieces. One night in the middle of the night, we wake up to a loud bang from upstairs. We go and look, and the ceiling fan is going about 8 times faster than it should be capable of going. Embedded in the wall over the guest bed is one of the blades of the ceiling fan. The wrought iron arm had been twisted and broke off. That fan wasn't even a year old. We put the house on the market after 2 years, And now I'm not quite as certain in my assurance that the paranormal is fiction. One night I was up late watching TV in the living room. My ex-boyfriend was in the bedroom asleep. All of a sudden, I hear my daughter whisper in my ear, "Mommy." She did that a lot so she wouldn't wake up my ex. So I turned around to see what she wanted, but stopped when I remembered that my children were staying the night at their grandma's. I was creeped out for the rest of the night. 4 years ago, I woke up in the middle of the night. We had a 2-month newborn sleeping in the room next door. I had a video monitor on my bedside table so that we could easily check on him. So, I clicked the button that turns on the video image, and what I saw scared me like nothing ever before. My baby boy was gone. Now, I know the instincts should have made me run right into the baby's room. Instead, I froze. Finally, I moved, but not to run into the other room like I should have done. Instead, I turned up the volume on the baby monitor. I heard another woman's voice singing a lullaby. I'm not kidding. Another woman was singing to my baby in a very soft, gentle, and melodic voice. I don't remember what song it was. Something like "Go to sleep, little baby." Finally, my freeze broke. I jumped up, ran through the hallway, and burst into my boy's room. He was sound asleep in his crib. No woman, no singing. Turns out, the monitor was picking up my next-door neighbor's monitor. They had just bought the video monitor for their own newborn on our recommendation. Nothing supernatural here, but I don't know if I've ever experienced something scarier. This happened to me when I was little. I went camping with my older brother and my mom. I was about 7 or 8, and I went to bed around 10 in a sleeping bag inside my tent with both my mom and brother. Sometime during the night, I don't know when, I woke up somewhere in the middle of the woods, still in my sleeping bag. I had no idea where I was or where my tent was. I screamed for my mom, and I heard her calling back for me in panic, but she was easily 100 yards away or so. To this day, I have no idea how I ended up in the middle of the woods, still inside my sleeping bag. Gives me chills. I used to work as a sleep study technician at various sleep clinics. When I first got the job, a few of my fellow techs warned me about the haunted clinic. I thought they were joking. They weren't. They told me about the creepy things that would happen there. Some techs refused to work there again. I was already assigned to a couple of clinics and hoped I would never have to work at the haunted one. It was probably a year into the job when the tech who was working in that clinic quit, and I was asked to take over there starting that night. Dread started building up in the pit of my stomach when I saw that place. It was a creepy, old Victorian mansion that was divided up into a bunch of doctor's offices, around 130 years old, based on a little research I did on it later. It originally belonged to some prominent local politician, then was turned into apartments, then into offices. I told myself it was just an old house, no big deal. I walked into the dark lobby, turned on the lights, and walked up the creaky stairs to the sleep clinic on the second story. I took a tour of the clinic, getting myself acquainted with it, I felt fine until I got to what was formerly a kitchen and was now used as a storage or prep room. I started feeling uneasy. Right next door was the final room, which was one of the bedrooms the patients would sleep in. I hated that room. Bad, bad vibes as soon as I stepped into it. I didn't even believe in places being haunted, but that room made me start to consider it. It was always so much colder than the rest of the clinic. Poor insulation, I could tell myself. Doors would swing and open on their own. It's just gravity. The doors aren't level, I would tell myself. I would hear creaking floorboards when I knew there was no one else in the building, just the sleeping patients and myself. Old houses creak, I would tell myself. I would think I saw shadows and lights out of the corner of my eye. Just my imagination. That one room kept getting infested with bugs, but never the other rooms. The TV in there kept breaking. The light bulbs kept going out. The sleep study equipment would malfunction. The patients I put to sleep into that one room would complain. It was too cold. It felt creepy. They felt like they were being watched. No one ever complained about the other bedroom in the clinic. I worked nights in that clinic for a couple years. Finally, one day at the end of my shift, I woke up the patient who was sleeping in the problem room. I knew she slept poorly based on her sleep study. I asked her how she was feeling. She told me she didn't sleep well because she kept dreaming over and over again that there were dead bodies in the walls. I could tell she was scared. I couldn't take it anymore after that. After the patients left, I had to go back into that room and clean it up as I trembled and thought about how I was all alone in that building. When I finished up, I literally ran out of the building into my car. I decided to finally quit. Turns out I didn't have to. The doctor decided to close that clinic. I only had to work another 2 or 3 nights there. Thankfully, on those nights, I only had one patient, so I was able to put them in the good bedroom and leave the problem room alone. I had a dream once where the dog I grew up with was mad at me. He was still living with my parents. I was in a different city that I moved to after grad school. He said he was upset that I didn't visit him more and that I'd regret it. The next morning, I got a call from my parents telling me that the dog had passed away during the night. I'm so sorry, Gizmo. I should have gone to see you more. My parents used to be woken up to somebody screaming me or my big sister's name and knocking on the windows. I never believed them, but I woke up one night and had to pee, and as I left the bathroom, I hear a tapping and my name being called. I freaked out and ran into my room and hid under my covers. A few minutes later, the tapping was on my window, and I heard my name again, and it continued for about 10 minutes, then abruptly stopped. Midsummer's Eve, about 10 years ago, me and my ex-significant other were planning on spending a romantic weekend at his mother's childhood home, which was now serving as a summer cottage. The cottage was located in a tiny island, and in order to reach it, you had to first leave your car by the road. It was really remote, so this could be done. Then you walked about 2 kilometers through the woods, and finally row a boat across a small river. When we reached the cottage, we found the key to the door was missing. I was already feeling like there was something out of place, but decided I was probably just a bit tired from the journey. My then significant other was really long and skinny, so he managed to wiggle his way in through a small window and open the door from the inside. We then proceeded to unpack our stuff and get a fire going to warm up the sauna, a must on midsummer around here. My ex told me we were going to sleep in the first room on the left, the old master bedroom, and I went in to make the bed ready for us. As I entered, I was at once hit by a strong feeling of dread. We were not welcome there. I tried to shake it off because I didn't want to ruin our weekend, and so I said nothing about this to my ex. We decided to have a bite to eat before going to the sauna, and as we were eating, I noticed my ex start to look a bit pale. When I asked him if he was okay, he told me he was feeling really ill all of a sudden, and there was a chill running through him constantly. I put my hand on his forehead. He was clearly running a high fever. He was feeling just fine before, so we were both a bit puzzled by this sudden illness. We thought it would be best for him to rest for a while, so we went into the bedroom to lie down. I wasn't thrilled about going in there, but it was the only place with a bed at that time, so we really had no choice. I remember very vividly what happened next. We were lying on the bed, my ex with his eyes closed and breathing heavily, sickly warmth pouring from him like crazy, and me very much awake and alert. It began as a cold feeling of dread, just like before, but this time it kept escalating to the point of pure fear. My heart was pounding faster and faster as I realized we were in the middle of nowhere, we had no phone, and my ex was the only one of us who could even drive. Then I saw it in the doorway. A shadowy figure, clearly male, was standing on the doorstep. It was leaning toward us, radiating hate. It seemed reluctant to step all the way in, but made sure I knew if it chose to do so, it could. There was no other way out of the room except through the window, but that was sealed shut. I mustered all of my strength, shook my ex by the shoulder, and explained to him that we had to leave now. He was still very weak, but I managed to get him up and packing. The figure was nowhere to be seen. It had vanished when I focused on getting my ex to his feet. So, we packed in a hurry and left. I told my ex I had felt and seen something strange, but mainly I explained our haste with the fact that he was ill and we needed to get back to civilization while he was still able to travel. But what do you know? By the time we had crossed the river, he was feeling a lot better, and his fever was all gone before we reached the car. He mentioned something about maybe going back now that he was okay, but I quickly refused. We drove back to his parents' house, where there was a small midsummer family gathering taking place. People asked why we returned so soon, but I didn't say anything to anyone about what had happened, only that we came back because my ex was feeling ill. We had a couple of drinks, chatted with his relatives. Everything seemed back to normal. So much so that I was starting to doubt myself. Had I really even seen something? I must have been overreacting, imagining things. Then, my ex's uncle speaks up. "By the way, did you know the place is haunted?" I felt my stomach curling up with fear, as if I had swallowed an ice-cold stone. He continued, "Yeah, it really is. I remember my dad telling me about it. He said that even before he was born there were strange things happening down there all the time, according to his own father. Then, one day, a weird old man appeared to the door and said he was there to help. He then proceeded to draw lines across the yard with some kind of metal wire while chanting silently to himself. When the guy was finished, he said he had reconducted the energy flows around the property so that the house would from now on be left untouched by evil. Then he went on his way. I remembered all of this when my brother said he had done some landscaping at the cottage and removed a bunch of old wire that was running on the grounds. I wonder if the ghost is back now. I heard he really likes to frequent the master bedroom. Isn't that where you guys were sleeping? He laughed heartily at his last comment. I just sat there feeling sick to my core. I didn't dare to ask more details about this claimed entity, why it was thought to be there, or what it had previously done to make itself known. But I could not stop wondering, what would have happened if we hadn't left when we did? Never went back to the cottage. Never saw or felt anything like that again. As a kid, I loved to pick up the house phone whenever it rang. One day when I was about 6 or 7, I picked up the house phone and there was a man on the other end. Our conversation pretty much went like this. Hello? Hello, are your parents there? Yes, she is. I start walking to hand my mom the phone. Okay, I'll call back later. And then he abruptly hung up. I told my mom what happened, and she said not to pick up again. I didn't think anything of it until years later and realized how strange that was. He never did call back that I know of, and I still wonder who he was and what his intentions were. When my daughter was very young, 3 to 4, we were on a family vacation in a state park lodge. Our room had exposed wood ceiling beams to match the decor, important later. It was supposed to be nap time for my daughter, but she was quietly playing by herself and just chatting away, and the spouse and I were reading on the other bed. Out of the blue, my daughter turns to me and asks for a piece of rope. I asked why she needed the rope, and she nonchalantly replies, "It is for my friend, the purple girl on the ceiling." My spouse asks, "What friend?" And my daughter responds, "I've been talking with a little purple girl hanging from that wood up there." And she points to the ceiling beam. She asked me for another piece of rope. Needless to say, that nap time was over, and we quickly exited the room. My husband goes to work early, before the sun rises, so he told me to take this with a grain of salt. He was on his way to work when he saw something massive approach the road in his peripheral vision. He braked in anticipation, and the oncoming car seemed to see it too, and likewise screeched to a halt. Then this massive thing, which he described as a white sheet type thing, think the stereotypical white sheet ghost, crossed the road and disappeared into the trees. The car behind him honked, so he got going, but saw, as he drove past, the driver of the oncoming car just sitting there, staring, wide-eyed and confused. He says he wishes he had pulled over and talked to the guy to discuss what he saw, because they both stopped to let whatever that thing was cross the road. This was early last month or so. He says every day he still kinda slows down in that area to see if whatever it was manifests again. Scariest moment of my life happened while my friend and I were camping in eastern Canada as teenagers. We decided to sleep in this abandoned camper we found deep in a large forest that was near our town. It had been there so long that small trees had grown around it. We'd stumbled across it when we were exploring a few months back and thought it would be cool and brave to sleep there for a night. So, one weekend, we did it. We arrived after dark because we had gotten lost trying to find the camper. We had a really low power flashlight, so it made it even more difficult. Once we finally found it, we opened the rusty door and stepped in. The sounds inside the camper were shrill and echoey. There were typical camper things strewn about: cups, empty cans, swollen Pulp Fiction novels. Already tired, we holed up in one end of the camper where the bed area had originally been before the cushions had rotted away to almost nothing. A long hallway stretched the length of the camper, so we could basically see from end to end. It was a miserable night. There were several rats living in there. I saw them staring at us from a chewed-out part of the ceiling. When the wind blew outside, the camper would shriek and groan. We even thought we heard a bear outside, too, walking around. Still, we feigned bravery and acted like we were having a good time. But we were on edge. At some point, I woke up from an uncomfortable sleep. I sat up to adjust myself when I noticed some movement out of the corner of my eye. At the other end of the camper, there was a small window, and as I looked at it, I saw a man's silhouette. He was clearly staring at me from outside. At first, I thought maybe it was a weird shape of a tree or something. But when I moved a bit to get a better look, the person clearly reacted and then froze. My heart was pumping, and I woke up my friend immediately, saying, "Someone is here," over and over in a whisper, not taking my eyes off his profile. He woke up immediately, and I nodded towards the window. He saw him too. We whispered frantically about who it could be and why was he staring at us. And for the next 10 minutes, no joke, we stared him down. The longer we stared at him, the more frightened we got. Occasionally, he would move, but always keeping his eyes locked on us. Eventually, I shouted at him, "Hey!" No reaction. My friend was braver than me and decided to shine the flashlight at him. As soon as he did, we realized our horrible mistake. It wasn't a window at all on the other side of the camper. It was a mirror. We had been staring down ourselves from the very start. Completely idiotic. Still, it was the most fearful, relieving, and funny moment of my life that I'll never forget. Closest to paranormal I've ever been. When I was a kid, I had a lava lamp. When it was on, it was getting really hot. Since it was yellow, I was using it to draw at night. So I was sitting there drawing when all of a sudden the lamp turns itself off. I started panicking because I'm really afraid of the dark and start calling for my mom for help. She came into my room, and when I explained the situation, she said the lamp was never turned on. I was sitting in the dark this whole time. I touched the lamp, and it was cold. My mom once told me that my paternal grandmother would yell out for me whenever we were finished camping in a forest.
She said that my grandma would insist on having everyone yell out my name and to yell out, "Come back, we're leaving." They would do this despite me being right next to them. She said there are tiny little gnomes that would take a child's soul to play in the trees, and if they didn't yell out for me to return before they left, that my soul would be stuck there forever. Well, my friends, that is all for episode 15 of Ms. Story Mysteries Tales of Mysteries and Oddities. I hope you enjoyed today's collection of strange true stories. If you did, please like and subscribe. Also, please consider sharing with a friend, as this will help me out immensely as I am working hard to grow my channel. And if you have a true experience that you would like to share, please email me at itsmisstorymystery@gmail.com. Until next time, take care of yourself and stay spooky.